on the show tonight.
She's so bad. She's so pathetic.
Donald Trump gives his brutal verdict on the Democrats' poor performance from the golf course. The Royal Navy are called in as Jamaica gets battered by Hurricane Beryl. It's decision day as party leaders join millions of voters having their say in the general election. Plus...
Oh! He's on the top! Blimey.
Dogs behaving very badly. Guru Graham Hall will tell us all about his new project.
From across the UK, this is 5 News.
Good evening. In just the last few minutes, the TV presenter Holly Willoughby has released a statement after a man was found guilty of masterminding a plot to kidnap, rape and murder her. As part of it, she said that women should not be made to feel unsafe going about their daily lives and in their own homes. The 37-year-old Gavin Plum developed an obsession with the former This Morning star and even assembled an abduction kit to carry out his attack. Well, Simon Vigar has been covering this for us for the last 2 weeks. Good evening to you, Simon. We've just had this statement. I know you've seen a copy of that as well in the last few minutes.
Hi Dan, yes, Holly Willoughby not here at court, but she has released this statement. Here is some of it. As women, we should not be made to feel unsafe going about our daily lives and in our own homes. I will forever be grateful to the undercover police officer who understood the imminent threat and to the Metropolitan and Essex police forces for their swift response. So after 12 hours of deliberating here, the jury foreman announced 3 unanimous guilty verdicts on the plot to kidnap, rape and murder Holly Willoughby. She hasn't come to any of the trials. There was no requirement for her to be here. Gavin Plum, a security guard from Harlow, shook his head and he wept in the dock as he was convicted for his crimes. This is the moment an online plot collided with the real world.
What's going on?
37-year-old security guard Gavin Plum arrested at his home in Harlow. He'd been planning to kidnap Holly Willoughby.
I'm not going to lie, she's a fantasy of mine.
A fantasy, but not one, he told the jury, he would ever act upon. They did not believe him. The jury was shown hundreds of messages sent by Gavin Plum in various online chat rooms. They are so derogatory and so graphic, I cannot repeat them on air, but suffice to say, there are detailed plans for the abduction, rape and murder of Holly Willoughby. Gavin Plum claimed that one man called Mark had led him on, but that came to nothing. He tried to enrol another man called David, and what he didn't know was that David was an undercover policeman in the United States. Holly Willoughby waived her right to anonymity, but she wasn't required to attend the trial and chose not to come. The jury was shown this equipment which Plum had bought. He shared pictures of it with his online contacts. They also heard voice notes like this, where he talks about more women they will abduct.
Yeah, we get this lot on board, mate. It's going to be the original. Holly, obviously. Our original targets and then whatever else targets they want, because we've got about 15 cells we're looking at filling. So, yeah, it's all good.
Of the hundreds of messages, the prosecution barrister, Alison Morgan KC, said, "These are violent, graphic descriptions of what you're going to do to Holly Willoughby." Gavin Plum said, "No, because it was never going to happen." Perhaps most damning of all were his previous convictions. As a young man, Plum tried to force women out of trains. He had taped up the hands of 2 girls in the back of a shop. The prosecution told the jury this is a man who had already crossed the threshold from fantasy to reality. David Nelson was the pseudonym of the undercover officer in America who then contacted his counterparts in the UK. They were all convinced that Plum posed a real threat.
He'd checked out the route, he'd bought chloroform and metal cable ties online. We were always clear that his intention was to carry out his violent attack. And actually, if it hadn't been David Nelson, if it had been somebody else that he'd found online that turned up at his front door and said, we're ready to go, I've got no doubt that the outcome could have been very different.
His online posts were not the ramblings of a fantasist. Gavin Plum had form, and he believed he'd hit the jackpot when he found a willing accomplice. In fact, he'd found a policeman.
It's really concerning, isn't it? Let's go back to Simon, because you've been covering this case right from the start. And one of the key areas is the prosecution had to prove intent, didn't they?
Yes, that's right, Dan. It wasn't about whether the jury thought that Gavin Plum's plan was credible for a 30-stone man without a driving licence to mastermind a house invasion and an abduction. It was about whether he believed it would happen, what he believed he had encouraged people to do. That's what the judge told the jury a couple of days ago. And they decided he was encouraging other people to do it. He did think they would act on it. It wasn't just a vile fantasy, which, as you heard, was his defence. His previous convictions obviously played into it, but so too did his reaction when somebody in the US said they would fly over to take part. At no point did Plum say, no, this is just an online chat. And that's what led to the police raid you saw at the beginning of my report. Gavin Plum will be back here a week tomorrow for sentencing.
OK, Simon Vigar, live from Chelmsford. Thank you very much for that. Next tonight, another really shocking story. A former teacher has been jailed for more than 6 years for having sex with 2 pupils. Rebecca Joins abused and manipulated her teenage victims. Bradley Harris has been following this one in court for us today. Bradley, good to speak to you this evening. It's fair to say, isn't it, that Joins was in court today and heard that verdict?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, well, the former teacher was crying in court today and was seen to be physically shaking as she was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. One half of that will actually be spent in prison. The other half will be spent on licence. And this sentence is off the back of a 2-week trial which heard how Rebecca Joins was 28 years old when she came out of a 9-year relationship and was flattered by the attention of teenage schoolboys. But today the parents of the 2 boys she abused watched on as that flattery turned to tears. Being a teacher was her dream job, but Rebecca Joins abused that position when she began grooming 2 school pupils from the age of 15.
So you are under arrest at the moment on suspicion of sexual activity with a child.
She was at home and completely in shock when the police turned up to arrest her in October 2021. But 3 days before, she was out on a secret shopping trip in Manchester with one of her pupils, buying him a £345 designer belt before taking him back to her flat to abuse him. They had already been messaging each other when she gave him all but one of the digits of her mobile phone number as part of a maths problem-solving exercise.
Do you regret what you did, Rebecca? Are you sorry?
While suspended from teaching and released on bail, she began abusing a second school pupil, which led to her becoming pregnant.
Rebecca Joins is a sexual predator. She was their teacher and they rightfully put their trust in her. But Joins decided to abuse her position and used it to groom 2 teenagers. We now wait for Joins to face the consequences of her actions.
Today, those actions led to 6.5 years in prison for a teacher who the judge said had abused her position of trust and exploited a privileged role for her own sexual gratification.
Bradley, tell us a bit more, if you can, about the 2 schoolboys involved in this and how their lives have changed.
Well, Dan, the 2 teenagers she abused, we can't actually identify because of their age and because they are victims of sexual abuse. But today, a victim impact statement was read out in court on behalf of one of the teenagers who has a child with Rebecca Joins, who described how he was coerced, controlled, manipulated and sexually abused by her. He said, "I struggled to come to terms with my abuse. I was completely in denial. I will forever be Rebecca's victim and forever linked to her through our child." The boy also said he had been told by social services that Rebecca Join had refused to let them update him about the baby's due date, gender or health. The judge today said Rebecca Join was a high achiever who had thrown her career away and had her baby taken away from her through her own actions.
That's Bradley Harris with the latest live from Manchester on 5 News. Thank you, Bradley. Some more of today's headlines. And a woman has admitted murdering her parents after their bodies were discovered at a family home in Chelmsford. Lois and John McCulloch were both in their 70s when they were killed in the summer of 2019. Their daughter Virginia will be sentenced later this year. Police have said they'll review their investigation into the deaths of 2 school children who were killed when a Land Rover crashed through their school gates. The families of 8-year-olds Nuria Sajjad and Selina Lau have raised concerns about the investigation after it was announced that the driver, who suffered an epileptic fit, would face no charges. And a third person has been arrested as part of an investigation into funeral directors in Hull. Officers removed 35 bodies and ashes from the Legacy Independent Funeral Directors in March after concerns were expressed about storage and management. It's left hundreds of families unsure about what happened to their loved ones. As we said, there is some pretty grim news around today. The Royal Navy has drafted in a warship to help support communities devastated by Hurricane Beryl. Now, the storm has killed at least 7 people across the Caribbean so far and caused a huge amount of devastation. You can see this is Jamaica behind me in the screen, and Danny Sinhar's got the very latest.
This was Hurricane Beryl unleashing its worst on Jamaica. Heavy rain has turned roads into rivers, and fierce winds and waves have battered the region.
That devastation, that is how you don't like. It's in a mess. It's in a mess. It's hard to think about it, it's hard to see it.
Many have had to flee Petite Martinique, finding sanctuary instead in Grenada. This lady survived 37 hours without food and had to bury one of her neighbours.
After I think you say that comes after. No, I didn't think I would have made it. I thought that was the end of me.
In Barbados, these fishermen have had their livelihoods snatched away from them.
All the vessels in here have damage. All have damage. Structural damage, but we got a good few vessels that is on the water. We don't know how much the total is right now, but we estimate about 30 or maybe 40 vessels on the water.
And this is where the storm is heading next. It's already hit the Cayman Islands and is due south of Cuba. The Gulf of Mexico is on standby in the next 24 hours. Many are preparing for the worst. And then there's the delayed reaction of holidaymakers who may be in for a shock.
We'll be staying here because our flight's not due home till Monday. And I think we'll just take advice from the hotel and the reps that are there, but we're not too scared.
With many Commonwealth countries like Grenada affected, it's being reported the royal family have made a private donation to hurricane victims. Shops here are getting ready to close, whilst residents are furiously stocking up. A slice of paradise which is slowly turning into a nightmare. Danny Sinha, 5 News.
And we're speaking to a guest about that a bit later in the programme. Now, as you can see, our countdown clock, which was to when the polls open, has reached 0, which means only one thing. It's polling day for the general election. So after weeks of campaigning, manifesto launches and political interviews, it is decision day. Ironically, we're not actually allowed to say that much about it. Ruth Liptrot joins us in the studio. Some people might be wondering why we have to be so careful today, because we can't really even mention the E word, can we, much?
Don't say the E word.
No, don't say it.
It's because we're not allowed to.
Yes.
5 News and, in fact, all broadcasters are not allowed to talk about election issues when the polls open. We can talk about the polls, though. They opened at 7 o'clock this morning and they won't close until 10 o'clock tonight.
So still plenty of time if you haven't voted yet.
Yeah, still plenty of time. And millions of people are expected to cast the vote, electing their local MP and helping to choose the next government. And it's the first general election where you'll need something like this. Passport, driving licence, don't zoom in because it's a horrible photo. It doesn't have to be a driving licence, so there are 22 kinds of ID that are valid. And
we've seen party leaders out and about and voting today as well, haven't they? Because they can vote in their own constituency, is that right? As long as they live there.
Yes, they can. They can vote for themselves as long as they are living in the constituency where they're standing. And you might recognise these two. Current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, his wife Akshata, and we've got Keir Starmer as well and his wife Victoria.
OK. And what happens when the polls actually close? Because there's a sort of flurry of activity later tonight, isn't there?
Yeah, around 10 o'clock we'll get what's called an exit poll, and this gives us a pretty good idea of which way things are going to go. And it's based on a small sample of voters when they leave the polling stations, around 130 polling stations around the country.
And what can we expect when the results actually come in? And when's that going to happen?
Normally from about 11:30 we start to get a trickle in, and there's often a race between constituencies who can be the first to declare. It's quite competitive. 2019, the first declaration came at 11:27 p.m. when Newcastle City Council beat local rivals Sunderland. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, though, that's when the declarations start to come in thick and fast. And it's estimated tomorrow morning between 6 and 7 a.m. That's when we should really know what's going on.
So if you don't want to stay up all night, you can wake up in the morning and find out what's happened. And how many people are expected to vote? It's hard to know the exact numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, around 46 million eligible. We don't know what the turnout's going to be, obviously, but they'll be electing 650 MPs across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And in order to get a majority government, political parties are looking to win more than half of this figure, which is around 326 seats.
OK, so that's a magic number to be looking out for. And I always love it on polling day when dogs at polling stations is one of the biggest trends on social media. And later in the programme, your dog is going to be on the show.
Yeah, she is. Betty came to the polling station with me this morning. It was very exciting.
And are your family more excited about seeing the dog than you on TV?
They don't care about watching me, but they're all tuning in for the dog.
A proper family. Ruth, thank you very much for that. Loads of really useful information there. And just to let you know, we'll be live from Downing Street tomorrow with all the latest for you, developments, analysis from our political editor, Andy Bell. And our correspondents and reporters are going to be all over the country as well. So make sure you join us tomorrow for 5 News at 5. We can talk US politics, where all eyes are on this man at the moment, President Joe Biden. Just last week, he took part in that debate with Donald Trump and hit the headlines, not for particularly good reasons. The resident president lost his train of thought, stumbled over his words and spoke incoherently at times. It was a performance which fueled calls for him to step aside. And although he's insisting he won't drop out of the race, he did admit, and these are his words, that he screwed up. Alan Jenkins has the story.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Last week's debate was meant to shore up his support as the Democrat nominee, but it was a difficult watch as Joe Biden stumbled and appeared to lose his train of thought.
Making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
At one point, Donald Trump responding,
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
It crystallised the concerns of some Americans that at 81, Joe Biden is too old to serve as president and sparked calls for him to step aside as his party's nominee. But he's rejecting those and vowed to fight on, last night telling a Wisconsin radio station,
I had a bad night. And the fact of the matter is that, I screwed up. I made a mistake. That's 90 minutes on stage. Look at what I've done in 3.5 years.
He says he's not going, but Donald Trump believes he will be, posting a video suggesting he'd face Vice President Kamala Harris as a Democrat nominee.
He's quitting the race. Is that right? Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic. It's so amazing. It's just
But senior Democrats are rallying around Joe Biden, a group of governors meeting him at the White House and afterwards promising to stand behind him.
What we saw in there today was a guy who was the guy that all of us believed in the first time, who could beat Donald Trump and did beat Donald Trump. With that, we thank you. So thanks all.
But as a professor of political science told us, he believes there's more than a 50% chance Biden will have to step down.
But it was a wake-up call to everybody to see him stand up there without notes and not be able to answer basic questions about policy, to not remember dates. That's just too humiliating to have a candidate that knows even less than Trump running. So I think his goose is cooked, frankly. And then the question is, what does the party do next?
That will depend on what happens tomorrow when Joe Biden is expected to take part in a TV interview. As he tries to get through what's been described as a crisis for the Democrats, he'll be aiming to show he can perform, know policy and be presidential. Alan Jenkins, 5 News.
There's a lot going on in the world at the minute, isn't there? Plenty more to come on the programme tonight. We've got a special report on the charities appealing for more donors to save lives. And have you got COVID again? If so, you're not alone. We'll tell you what's going on and have a GP live in the studio. All that, plus Claire has got the forecast.
Hello there, good evening. Now tomorrow we'll see some rain across southern counties. For Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's showers and in between some warm sunshine. I'll see you in a while.
If you could sort out the weather at Downing Street, Claire, that'd be great. See you after the break. Welcome back to 5 News. This by me is Ben Collins, a 24-year-old whose life was going brilliantly until Christmas Day last year. That's when Ben was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia, and now he desperately needs a stem cell transplant. Each year in the UK, around 800 people like Ben don't find a match, and 5 News has been given new figures that help explain why. Our health correspondent Catherine Jones has been taking a look.
7 for 8.
This is Boxing Day, 24 hours after Ben Collins learnt he has an aggressive blood cancer. For his girlfriend Emma, his brothers and his mum, watching the impact on the 24-year-old has been so painful.
His whole joke on Christmas Day was, oh, I must have been really naughty this year to get cancer for Christmas. That's his sense of humour. So seeing him go from that to being so low and staying down there, yeah, it's the hardest thing I think you can ever imagine, to see your child going through something this difficult. It's brutal, yeah.
Ben has spent many weeks in hospital having gruelling chemotherapy. In fact, that's where he is today. But his only long-term option is receiving a transplant of donated stem cells. Our bone marrow contains those cells, constantly at work making new blood cells. And when that process goes wrong, blood cancers or life-threatening anemia develop. The treatment is to wipe out those malfunctioning cells with chemo and radiation and replace them with healthy ones from a donor. But a close genetic match is really important, and figures compiled by blood disorder charity DKMS show new registrations to donate dropped off during the pandemic, and the numbers still haven't recovered. Compounding this, there's an age cut-off for donating, which means this year 10,000 people will drop off the register because they're too old. Part of the problem may be people aren't aware the donation process has become easier.
Donating your stem cells is a really simple outpatient procedure. It's very similar to donating blood platelets. In a nutshell, your blood is taken out of one arm, it's spun in the machine to remove the stem cells, your blood is put back into you. It really is a much easier process than it was maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
And his fur comes off.
6-year-old Amelia's bone marrow had stopped working and she had a transplant last August.
My hair has fallen out. I didn't recognise myself, so then I cried, but now I'm feeling much better.
Her new stem cells were donated by a young man from Germany.
It's amazing that someone actually took the time to do that, and you know, there's no question they did save Amelia's life.
Since Ben's family and friends began campaigning on his behalf, more than 2,500 people have signed up as potential donors.
People don't know that this is so easy to do, really, and how it's not life-changing, it's actually saving a life.
Ben is in remission at the moment, but doctors have warned him to expect the cancer to come back within 2 years.
If it comes back, it will be more aggressive and it will be untreatable. So his chances of survival, yeah.
So that donor is desperately needed?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a powerful story, isn't it? If you'd like to find out a bit more about joining the Stem Cell Donor Register, 2 charities on the screen now. You can contact them and find out a bit more. They are anthonynolan.org and dkms.org.uk. Now, here's an important health question. Have you or someone you know recently had the dreaded COVID again? Sadly, the answer to that might be yes. A summer COVID wave seems to be upon us. Although we don't have as much data as we used to get during the pandemic, the number of cases reported to the UK Health Security Agency has risen steadily over the past month, and it's as high now as it was back in February. Dr. Ellie Cannon, who spoke an awful lot about COVID during the pandemic, is with us live on 5 News tonight. Great to see you. What's happening, Ellie?
Well, there's definitely quite a lot of COVID around. So I was in clinic this morning, had quite a few calls from patients who are testing positive. The rates are going up. That's what we're seeing. Obviously, as you said, there's not the data that there once were, but they are going up, the rates.
We'll all remember the various phrases from the pandemic: hands, face, space. What sort of things should we be doing now to try and prevent the spread? Because people don't have to test anymore, you don't need to isolate, but there's still things we can do.
There are, and I really wish people had taken this away from the pandemic, actually. If you don't feel well, don't go to work, don't go to school. You should be staying at home. You don't have to be isolating like those strict isolations from 2020. But look after yourself, rest at home, make sure you're drinking. If you do feel unwell and you're vulnerable, like elderly, or we're talking about a child under 5, you should be speaking to the GP. But there aren't any rules about isolating. So if you choose to go to work, I obviously wouldn't recommend that. You can do that.
Do you think, is it something to do with, just ignorant question, like immunity levels? Has that changed, do you think? Has that sort of worn off a little?
Yeah, so they think immunity levels have changed. There's fewer people being vaccinated because we only vaccinate the most vulnerable people. The virus has mutated and mutated and mutated, which is a good thing, actually, because it's much less virulent than it once was. So it's just sort of the change. And actually, probably, if we monitored other viruses that I never talk on TV about, like adenovirus or one of these other ones, they probably go through all the same peaks and troughs.
Yeah, it's the same with the sort of seasonal flu
Exactly,
that we get.
yeah, absolutely.
And should we be, you're here talking about it, that's probably because we all came through a pandemic when those 5 letters really terrified people, didn't they? COVID really upset people and still has an impact on quite a few people as well. Should we be worried about this increase in cases?
So the UK Health Agency have said no. As I've said, it's not a virulent strain. We're not seeing huge waves of people going to hospital. Personally, from my own clinic, although I have spoken to patients, nobody has been ill enough even for me to offer any advice more than what I just said. So I don't think it's a cause for concern at the moment.
And do you think some of the people you've spoken to, because of what we all went through, do you think people are slightly more, more vigilant, but also slightly more concerned as well when they hear that word?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the word, it's COVID. And yet, a friend of mine's child had COVID and I said, well, sort of, what's worrying you? And she said, well, that it's COVID. It's not actually the symptoms. The symptoms are really a cold and a sore throat and being very tired, actually. But yeah, I think it does strike fear in all of our hearts. It takes us back to those very difficult days.
Yeah, a lot of emotional baggage, isn't there?
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming in. Take care of yourself.
You too.
And let's see you soon. We are here until the end of the hour. Plenty more to come your way, including, is your dog badly behaved? We might have some tips for you. That was particularly badly behaved. Get out of the fridge. And
we're at Wimbledon for what has been a stonker of a day if you're a British tennis fan. The Brits have brought the action across all the courts this afternoon. Later, though, all eyes on Andy Murray in one of his final appearances in his retirement year. He's bringing brotherly love in the men's doubles.
It's looking very nice and bright there, isn't it? Let's see if it's going to last. Here's Claire.
Bums. They belong on Cloud 9. Weather on 5, sponsored by Anusol Natural Cream.
In a nutshell, this is how tomorrow looks. Sunshine across central parts, showers towards the north and rain in the south. In fact, this evening it's wet and windy across central and northern areas of Scotland. Clearer skies across Northern Ireland, Northern England, but you can see this rain just bumping in across Wales, the Midlands, extending towards East Anglia and also further south. So a wet end to the night here. Some sunshine to start the day across Northern England, pushing down towards the Midlands and northern parts of Wales as we head through the morning, as well as Northern Ireland, but frequent showers across Scotland, extending further east and south across Northern Ireland and the far north of England as we head through the day. The rain waxes and wanes across the Midlands, central parts of Wales, but further south across southern counties, you'll see the rain right the way through the day. It comes and goes. It will be mostly patchy.
Frequent showers across most of the country through Saturday. These showers could be heavy, emerge to form a longer spell of rain across Wales. A lot of cloud as well and quite a breeze. Here are your temperatures, struggling generally 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. We could see an 18 for Cardiff as well as Bristol, and a similar situation through Sunday.
Bum needing its moment in the sun? Weather on 5, sponsored by Anusol Natural Cream.
Be ready to go outdoors.
Not as fresh or as wet tomorrow across more northern areas, but some rain in the south. Still quite a breeze, though, coming in from the west across Scotland with frequent showers, a little sunshine. Similar situation for Northern Ireland. Some lovely sunshine, Northern England, Wales. You can see where the rain is towards the south.
The activities report with Go Outdoors. Discover freedom.
Thank you for that, Claire. The time has just gone 5:30. Here in the screen are the top 5 things you need to know today. Our top story tonight, TV presenter Holly Willoughby has said that women should not be made to feel unsafe going about their daily lives and in their homes. She released a statement after security guard Gavin Plum was found guilty of masterminding a plot to kidnap, rape and murder her. A Royal Navy warship has set off for the Cayman Islands to help relief efforts in the wake of Hurricane Beryl. The powerful storm has killed at least 7 people. A former teacher who had sex with 2 teenage boys has been jailed for 6.5 years. A judge said that Rebecca Joins had shown breathtaking arrogance. It is decision day. Millions of you have been voting in the general election today. We can't say too much about it because of election rules today. We'll have an awful lot more on tomorrow's show, which will be live from Downing Street. And finally, it is an exciting day, day 4 at Wimbledon, because this fella, Andy Murray, is back on court. Let's get a bit more information from Daniel Rosney, who's been down there for us today. Lovely to see you, Daniel. Enjoying the nice weather down there in southwest London as well. What's the build-up been like to seeing Andy Murray back on court today?
Hi Dan, lots of excitement as Andy Murray starts his final run at these championships, but there's been plenty of British action on these courts behind me this afternoon, and what a day it's been for Harriet Dart. First of all, the British number 1s played the British number 2s in both the men's and the women's singles. Let's talk about the women's game first, because Katie Boulter played Harriet Dart, and that became a Wimbledon classic as the British number 1 was sent home with Dart battling her way to the win, securing her place in the next round. And then it became the turn of the men, with the men's singles currently still taking place on court now between Jack Draper and Cameron Norrie. They're still playing as we speak.
And Daniel, lots of interest as ever about Novak Djokovic as well today.
Yeah, and after losing the first 2 sets to Novak Djokovic, 22-year-old British wildcard Jacob Fernley managed to claw it back, taking the third, but ultimately it was the 7-time Wimbledon champ Djokovic who sent Fernley home, who was only 11 years old when he was sat at home watching Andy Murray win Wimbledon for the first time back in 2013. And all eyes are on Andy Murray and on centre court this evening as he makes his return to the All England club. It's only 12 days since he had surgery to remove a spinal cyst. On Tuesday, he said he wouldn't be ready in time to take part in the singles, instead focusing his efforts on the doubles with his brother, Jamie. They have played doubles before, but never at Wimbledon, so it's a first and a last for Andy Murray.
Brilliant. Daniel, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day there at Wimbledon. Good to see you. We are going to take a short break for you now, but if you have a pesky pup in your house, you will not want to miss our next guest, known as the Dog Father.
So how old is he?
He's 3.5 now. Oh!
Beautiful. Are you all right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's getting me scrunchy out of my hair. Ouch!
Graham's coming up before the end of the programme, and find out why some koalas will no longer be getting cuddles. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. I'm definitely getting my steps in today. It's the time in the programme now where we do this and take you around the world in 3 stories. Our first stop is US state of California, where the wildfires are still raging there. 30,000 people have had to leave their homes and a huge area of land has been burnt, 3,000 acres. That's roughly the size of the entire footprint of Heathrow Airport. Next are some incredible images from Sicily. In Europe's tallest active volcano, that's Mount Etna, lava burst into the night sky. Look at this from one of the largest craters there. Some tourists even tried to take selfies. I mean, it looks nice, but we definitely would not recommend that. And finally to Queensland in Australia, where koala cuddles are no more. The Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary has entertained all sorts of stars over the years: Taylor Swift, Vladimir Putin, everyone in between, letting them pose with the cute furry koalas. But those days are gone. Sanctuary staff said they have made the change in response to feedback from visitors. Earlier on, we told you in the programme about the storm that's due to hit the Cayman Islands. We're joined now by Alexander Williams, who is the High Commissioner of Jamaica to the UK, because that's where Hurricane Beryl has caused real problems as well. Alexander, thank you very much for speaking to us tonight on the programme. Some of the pictures we're seeing are really scary. Give us an idea of what you are hearing from Jamaica about some of the devastation that's been caused.
Well, first of all, let me say, Dan, that it has not been as bad that it could have been. The eye of the storm actually passed southwest of the island. Yes, we have lost some roofs. There has been damage to some roadways, blocked roadways, and flooding in the usual low-lying areas. The island is quite right now 60% without electricity. And I understand our local light and power providers doing everything to restore electricity in a short space of time. We have suffered one fatality, it appears, who got washed away in some storm water. But apart from these, largely, it hasn't been as bad as it could have been.
Well, that's good to hear. And it's worth remembering, isn't it, Alexander? This is a really rare size of storm and force of storm. How well prepared are places like Jamaica for this?
Well, I don't mind telling you that our ODPEM, which is our Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management Agency, it's like a well-oiled machine nowadays. It knows what to do and did it early out. Orders were made by the Prime Minister declaring Jamaica a disaster area, which allowed for certain relief to take place in speedily. Our shelters were opened and we accommodated 488 persons across the island. So we were fairly well prepared for it, you know. Drains were cleaned in advance of the hurricane. And I suppose in large measure, that's the reason why we didn't have the extensive damage that one would associate with a Category 4 hurricane early in the hurricane season.
Yeah, it's great
so
to
we
hear.
were prepared.
It's great to hear that it hasn't caused anywhere near the damage that some people were expecting. Alexander Williams, really appreciate your time, the Jamaican High Commissioner to the UK. As he was saying, Hurricane Beryl is the most powerful storm ever to make landfall this early in the season. Now, who do you call when you're struggling with a dominant Doberman or a greedy German Shepherd? This fella, the dog father, Graham Hall, is known for taming pesky pooches on his Channel 5 show Dogs Behaving Very Badly, and he's coming out with a new book. Have a look.
Oh! He's on the top. Blimey. Hey! He's got a taste for it now, hasn't he?
No.
So how old is he?
He's 3.5 now. Oh!
Are you all right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's getting me scrunchy out of my hair. Ouch, Prince!
This is how close she is constantly when I'm trying to eat.
Yeah.
Like, she would have that.
Boy, trying to eat me biscuit.
That's naughty.
Vesta! Vesta, no! Vesta, no! Off! Oh, he's so strong. Get off, no!
You're laughing, but you're the man who sorts all those problems out. Graham's with us in the studio. Because you've written this new book, haven't you, that helps parents and kids take care of dogs and introduce dogs into the family.
That's right.
Key question, why do we need it, do you think?
Well, Puffin came to me, you know. They asked me if I would do a children's book, because I've written a couple of others. And I don't know about you, Dan, but I had Puffin books as a kid.
Loved them,
They were great, weren't they? And I thought, wow, me writing a Puffin book. So I was suitably flattered. And I thought, right, we've called it the ultimate kids' guide to dogs because everything's in there. From how to choose a dog, how to look after them, how to train them, all about the different breeds, history of dogs. So if you're a child or an adult and you're interested in dogs, it's all in there. Good.
And parents are really worried about, aren't they, what sometimes they put their kids into situation-wise. Are there certain things in a dog's behaviour that parents should be wary of, do you think, when they're bringing them around children?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if a nervous dog can be unpredictable, as you see on dogs behaving very badly sometimes, that's a bit of a worry around children, for sure. I don't fixate too much on the breed, I'll be honest. There are some powerful breeds, of course, but any dog is capable of doing harm, so it's very much down to training, making sure you've got a well-behaved dog who's steady when they're around children. Calmness is what you're after. Because
we've talked a lot on this programme about the XL bully issue. Yeah. I wonder, as an expert in this field, do you think some dogs are incurably badly behaved? Is it bad owners or bad dogs?
Yeah, good question. Listen, my view on this is that there are some XL bullies out there, some who were badly bred by people for the wrong reasons to bring out certain aggressive traits. They've ended up in the hands of some people who probably should never be dog owners. But, big but, I've also seen XL bullies that are the sweetest dogs. You know, not a bad bone in their body, owned by people who are really responsible. So, you know, I think the ban was a sledgehammer to crack a nut. For sure, big, powerful dogs. I speak as a former Rottweiler runner, you know. If things go wrong with a big, powerful dog, it'll go wrong very quickly.
Yeah.
But the ban to me was a bit like saying, look, big, powerful cars, we should just ban the lot. So actually, it's how they've been driven, isn't it? And I think it's the same with dogs. It's how you behave around your dog, how you train them.
And everybody watching this who's got a dog will say, oh, my dog's lovely, it's got a lovely personality.
Yeah, it's true.
Are there certain dogs that are almost have that lovable personality built in? Because I'd say that about our dog, Winnie, who's a cockapoo, who's brilliant around children, and we think she's the best dog in the world.
I mean, there are some breeds that tend to be quite easy. So if I'm doing a talk and somebody's got a small dog problem, right, with respect to all people with little dogs, I've got one. They can be a bit nippy and yappy and all the rest of it. As a jokey response, I'll say, I've got the answer to your problem. It's really simple. You're not going to have to make notes. It's going to change your life. Get a Labrador. Because we all kind of know that usually they're pretty good.
Yeah.
So there are some breeds that are a good bet.
But I also think there's the number of people whose lives have been changed by having a dog in it, whether that's for a loneliness issue, whether that's bringing a family together. There is a beautiful bond and a beautiful... There's a love and a connection that comes into a family when there's a dog in there.
You're absolutely right. And love sounds like a very strong word to use, but there is some science behind that. So studies have shown that when humans and dogs who know each other, owners and their dogs, get together, oxytocin is produced, and it's one of those hormones that we think of as the love hormone. It's known as that. It's the same hormone that exists in mum and young children. So interesting that, yeah. Are dogs capable of loving us? Well,
there you go.
As far as we can tell, I think so, yes.
The science backs it up.
There you go.
My favourite thing about today, when we're not really allowed to discuss the general election much, but the #1 trend on social media today has been dogs at polling stations.
Yeah, you see, to me, this is the best day in the year on telly because nobody's talking politics and we're all talking dogs. It's great.
So we thought we'd test you out, since you know your stuff. I'm going to show you some dogs at polling stations, and I need you to identify the dogs.
Oh, here we go.
First up, this is Nelson, who was very excited to watch his mummy vote this morning and celebrates his first birthday on Sunday.
Right, he's a big lad, isn't he?
Yes. What do you think?
So, Hungarian Vizsla, and that picture was taken on a rare moment when he wasn't barking.
Right, OK. Bit of a personality insight as well. Next up, we've got Betty. Betty belongs to our very own Ruth Liptrot. There you go.
Oh. Now, I would have said she's some sort of spaniel cross, but I'm not sure with. She's got a long body.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a bit of Dachshund way back.
Yeah, she's a bit like Ruth. She's a lot of trouble. Yeah. Our third one, we've got Helen. Helen's on the left, dressed up as Princess Leia.
I'm glad you pointed out that was Helen on the left. And surely that's an Ewok.
That isn't. Well, what type of dog dressed up? What breed of dog? Sorry, dressed up as an Ewok.
It's a poodle cross of some sort. I mean, maybe a Cavapoo, I'm guessing.
Yeah, her name, I think it's Pico, is the name.
All right.
Looks got a touch of the Chewbacca's about her as well, doesn't she?
Yeah, for sure.
Dog number 4, please. Would you take the stand? George enjoyed his walkies, and that's big sister Darcy on the left.
Lovely.
George?
Cocker Spaniel, probably a show breed one, I would have thought.
OK, even I know this next one, I think. Finally, Ruby. who remembered her photo ID, complete with authorised, a signature, and there's a paw print on there as well.
Bless her. Well, of course, yes, golden retriever, but
correct.
You see, I could have said yellow Labrador, and I would have been wrong.
I don't know what it says about politics at the moment, but it looks like there's a little tear in that dog's eye.
There is a tear in her eye, isn't there? I don't know who it's for, but let's not go there.
Graham, all the best with the book. Thank you so much for coming in. Lovely to see you. And a huge thank you to everybody who sent in their pictures. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow, live from Downing Street.
Bums. They belong